Hello, and welcome to our weekly LinkedIn Live leadership series, Voices of Leadership. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Kathy Eastwood, your host and CEO of Equals Y. Each week, we explore the fascinating world of leadership, featuring voices from various generations, industries, and backgrounds. A team's job is really to deliver results. The role of the leader is to empower, inspire, and enable the people and team to deliver those results. But there's a repeatable formula to really drive that success. E3 leaders express the end vision, engage their team, and execute with precision, all powered by emotions. However, each leader's approach to applying that code really is unique because there's no one way to show up. We have to be unique. So that's why we love talking to different leaders and understanding what their approach to leadership is, what their style is, their core values, etc. So before we get started, let's make this as interactive as possible. Please let us know where you're calling in from. It's an opportunity to network. Please be prepared to ask questions because I know our guest today, Chris, is ready to answer any questions you have. And also, we wanted to ask you all a question. So I asked Chris before we got started, what would be a great question? So we wanted to know, what are you currently binging today for TV? So let us know in the comments. And then in the meantime, let me introduce today's guest. He's someone that I've known for a lot of years and respected. Chris Jolly is the Vice President of Solution Consulting at ServiceNow. He spent his career helping global organizations tackle complex challenges, build high-performing teams, and turn technology into real transformation. But what really stands out about Chris is his ability to lead both strategically and with heart. And I always talk about, the people first strategy. So this is what I love about Chris. And he doesn't just talk about results. He builds a team and cultures that really make them happen. So Chris, that's my quick introduction. But what I'd love is to really introduce you. I'm so excited to have you here. But why don't you tell the audience your journey, how you got here, and a little bit about your leadership beliefs?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kathy, and really look forward to the conversation and engaging with the audience. And this is a great topic for us to have a conversation about. And it's something I'm passionate about. And I'll give a little background of how I got started really in kind of technology and where that's kind of taken me through leadership. And I actually started in sales, and this is a long, long time ago, and it was inside sales and dialing. And I quickly learned I really loved technology and had a strong background. I grew up around technology as a kid. My dad worked for IBM, so we always had access to computers in the house. So I knew technology was where I wanted to be. And as I went through that journey, and I worked for really small companies in the beginning, and in small companies, your culture is so critical, and leadership is really, really important. And then that's where I just started kind of observing of the stylistic approach of how people were leading teams, creating the culture, and then the environments where I actually thrived in or maybe didn't thrive in. So that started to shape kind of my ideas of different type of leaders, and if I ever got into leadership, how I would actually what type of leader I would be. And as I progressed in working for small companies, someone just one day goes, "Hey, we need someone to help lead a team. Uh, Chris, you have the most tenure here, so can you help lead the team?" And at that point, I was kind of thrust into a leadership role, and I really, really wasn't prepared. It was like one day I was an individual contributor, the next day I was a leader, and so that was my early start, and it was an incredible learning opportunity. And I did a lot of things right, and also made a lot of mistakes. And so, over time, I reflected on that when I went back to being an individual contributor afterwards, and became a solution consultant. And then years later, and at Hewlett Packard, I had the opportunity to become a leader again. And my journey, and maybe a similar journey to other people on the call, is I applied for multiple roles, leadership roles, and obviously I didn't get them all. And you go through this process of becoming a leader, of going through an interview, thinking you're ready, not getting the role, being disappointed. But if you're committed to it, you keep that process, you take the lessons learned, you get the feedback, and then you need to start to kind of invest in yourself. And I think that was one of the big things that I learned, is you need to invest and learn about becoming a leader, whether that's classes, talking to mentors, getting a coach, Kathy. And so when I had the opportunity to get a leadership position again, I learned I needed to change some things. And that was, how do you build a culture? How do you build a team? How do you get results? How do you lead with empathy? All those kind of things. And what type of leader do you want to be? How do you want to show up in the good times? How do you want to show up when you're going through an organizational change? Or how do you want to show up when you're going through really, really tough times? And so I always did a lot of reflection as I was growing as a leader. And I just anchored on a couple things. And for me, I realized that, being from a stylistic standpoint, there's lots of leadership styles. I tend to fall in the classical servant type of leader, and working with the team, helping the team, coaching, mentoring, also learning from them. And along the way, just got, I'll say, improved in lots of other areas, not only on the technology, which I had a passion for, but the people. And I had a great leader. And you probably remember Deborah at Hewlett Packard, and you get I love tough but fair leaders. And I remember one day she said, "Hey, Chris, you're a great technical leader. You need to work on the people side and lead with empathy and all those things." And so that started to really change the way I thought about leading a team. Is you can't always just be results driven. You can't always be focused on just one or two things. You've got to look at more of a 360 view. And I took that to heart and became more of a people focused servant leader. Definitely became incorporated into my approach. And then over time, I just looked for opportunities and found leaders around me that were supportive, that I could learn from, that were willing to coach and mentor me, and then also give you the tough feedback, which I do think is important as a leader. We all know what we're good at. We may not know what we're not so good at. So finding ways to actually get that feedback, and then be committed to applying it. So the journey was really figuring out what type of leader you want to be, how do you want to show up, and then what kind of culture and team do you want to build over time. And then along the way, support your team and support their journey as well. I think it's important as a leader not just to focus on kind of your goals and aspirations, but you need to look at the team and the people that you're working with that are helping you every day, and how you can be a champion and advocate for them to advance whatever their career journey is.
So Chris, I mean, the awareness, like that's the word that comes out as I
Yeah.
listen to everything you heard, the self-reflection and the awareness. You talked about starting your journey and thinking about it from that place. Um, what was it, that first reflection point that you said, yeah, this is good and this is bad? Do you remember where you had that example of like a great leader, or something that you go, yeah, I definitely don't want to be like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's for me, there's lots of pivotal moments, I'll say, in my career that I learned from leaders, good and bad. And early on, and I'll mention the person's name. He's Tom. I worked at a small startup, and I just remember how engaging he was as a leader, and how um, he leaned in not only about the business but what we were doing in my career. And that was kind of a pivotal moment. I'm like, wow, I really recognize, if you have a great leader that's engaged, that's aware of what's going on, so like situational awareness there, and they're willing to invest in you, the amazing impact. And I worked really, really hard in that role, and it was all because of the leader. And so that was like a really, really positive moment. And then there's been other moments where you're going through, let's say, organizational change and having to make some tough decisions, and then you see kind of the bad aspects of leadership come out when they show up differently, and you're like, wow, that doesn't feel very good on the on the other end. And I'm sure everyone's experienced the great leaders, and then you're working with someone and you have a disengaged leader, things are happening and they're really like short with you, all those type of things. And so those are the type of moments that stuck out to me when you learn is what type of leader do you want to be, how do you want to show up in different situations. And those are two big ones, is the real positive aspect, Kathy, and then when times are tough, like you see what a leader is made up of, and if they show up all of a sudden in a different way, I think people start to shut down. And so that was a big big moment for me over the years. And it still happens. You can see people around you, how they situationally handle things, and you can see how the team reacts as well.
Yeah, because I mean, it's easy. I always say it's easy to be a leader. And in fact, you can kind of manage, right? When things are good, you got a playbook, life's good. Oh, we're having a great time. But it's when the shit hits the fan, excuse my language, that you're like the true, person shows up. And that's when you really do need to be caring the most about your people and helping them through.
Yeah, yeah. And this is just like the people aspect of it. Things aren't going to go right all the time. People are going to make mistakes, and like how a leader handles that, I think, is really, really important. And the other aspect is, what I've learned is leaders that provide consistent feedback, I think, like that works for me stylistically. So it's something I try to do versus, you wait to a big moment like the end of the quarter, the end of the year, and all of a sudden the performance review isn't what someone wants it to be. And that should never be a surprise. So I think, if leaders are showing up consistently, engaged with their team, providing feedback on a regular basis, like that can create a great environment and a great culture. Continuous feedback, I believe, is really, really important for a team, not just for a leader, but for peers, everywhere in the organization. I think that makes a big, big difference in my experience.
Yeah, I agree. And, what I've also learned is not everyone's the same, right? So some people want that constant feedback. Some others want it at like intervals. And then there are some that actually prefer it all at once, which is not my personal preference, nor is it something. But is that something you look at when you have a team, asking them what they like and what some of their styles are so you can adapt?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's important. There's leaders that say you have to adapt to my style, and then there's leaders that also adapt to the team. And what I do think is important, if you want to build a best team, you want to probably build a diverse team. And I know you can think of diversity from gender, age, race, and so on, but you can also think of how people approach things, how they solve a problem, diversity of thought, diversity of experience. So when you're building or shaping the team, you're going to have lots of different people that approach things differently. So I think as a leader, you really need to understand that. Back to your point, Kathy, some people may want to do a weekly one-on-one. Other people maybe, hey, let's do it every 2 weeks. Let's do it, once a month, and we'll check in via, email, or I'll send you an update. So you need to be self-aware of how your team also wants to interact and engage and work with you, and make some adjustments. So you can't, if you have kids, you don't treat each kid the same way, and it's just like people you work with. You have to meet them where they are as well, and that's critical, because what works for one person may not work for another person. And if you want to get the best out of people and help them in their journey, deliver results as a leader, you definitely have to, in my opinion, be willing to adjust to their style and get some sort of agreement of how you're going to work together.
And I think that work together thing, because, I've had people ask me like, well, shouldn't they, you mentioned it before, shouldn't they adapt to me? And I think it's finding the right balance, right? Because if you let them know, this is how I like to work, this is how we're going to get the most out of me, and this is how I like to lead, I think they also then have that insight into yourself. So it's that agreement and, really meeting each other, right, in the right place.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's really important because even as a leader, there's certain things you're going to look for and expect. So I think being clear on that is like, hey, these are the things that we all need to be focused on and worked on. So, if you set the vision, you set some of the aspirational goals, like these are foundational things that we don't compromise on. And then, the other ones you can be a little bit more flexible on, but that agreement or negotiating some of those things, I do believe is important. So there's no surprises when, a leader goes back to an individual and it's like, hey, this is what I'm looking for. And they're like, what do you mean? I didn't know. So it is the communication and providing some clarity around that. Your role, I think, Kathy, role clarity is really important, and that does shape some of the agreement. The how is a little bit different. Some people are just going to approach things differently, and the leaders got to be okay with that. Not everyone approaches things the same way as you, or solves the problem the same way as you do. They just may have a different style and approach, and I encourage it. I think it's a good thing. You don't need everyone to run the business or operate the same way you do.
Yeah, no, that's great. And actually, we have a question here from Ralph. So I think this is kind of the right time to ask it. Do you offer tough feedback to your teams? And if so, do you have any tips on how to deliver it without turning them off?
Yeah, I think being tough and fair is important, and I'll just say over the years I've gotten better at it. You can be direct, and sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it, and you also need to find the right time. As a leader, you got to be situationally aware, like when you give the feedback. Certain feedback you do immediately, other feedback you may wait a little bit, but you got to engage in the conversation. And for Ralph, I think showing some empathy as well is important when you're giving tough feedback. And if you know the person, you probably already know how they're going to react, what's going to work stylistically. And it's you know, in an in-person feedback is also different than remote feedback, like virtual feedback. So under understanding that, and I think a couple of things I learned is text, Teams messages, email, probably not the right vehicle for it. A conversation is better. And I think most times a lot of people have self-awareness that something may not be right. And so they may not be surprised at the feedback, but I do think how you deliver it is going to be really, really important. And then deciding, do you have a role to play to help improve it?
Yeah.
And is there, um, and have you been consistent feedback? Is it the first time or is it the fifth time this has happened? So all those things, Ralph, I think you got to figure it out. But I do think transparency and truth is really important, and then showing up as like a human. And if you have a good like EQ, that those are all things that definitely help. But you can't you can't walk away from the tough feedback, and you can't walk past problems consistently because they fester and just get worse.
Yeah, they'll come back and bite you. And
Yeah.
I think, you telling the story, like as we're having this conversation and you told your experiences and your reflections and saying tough and fair. Like I had a manager that provided me that tough feedback, but I knew they cared,
Oh
right?
yeah.
When you provide your insights into how you think about it, then people get to know your intent, right? Like I intend to help you improve, so that's why I'm giving you this feedback.
Yeah,
I think that makes a huge difference.
agree. That does make a big difference. And it goes both ways. By the way, is um, I think leaders have to be open to feedback from other people on their team, and that was something that took me a while to get used to. And you talk about examples. I do remember a time sitting with four of my leaders actually in Florida at lunch, and some information leaked out. Um, and maybe I should have communicated it. Maybe I shouldn't. I don't recall all the details, but they really gave me some tough feedback at that lunch, and I was like, whoa. But it was fair. It was very, very fair. And then we agreed like how we'll work together and handle the situations going forward. But I do think as a leader, like if you're going to give tough feedback and you're going to be fair, you do it with empathy and you have the the right intent, you should be willing to get tough feedback from your team is as well, and be able to handle it. And for the same ways you're asking the people is, is there something I can learn, is there something I can improve? But I do think bi-directional feedback is really, really important for high performing teams.
Yeah, I love that, Chris. And I think that's so important because you're setting the example, right? As a leader, we're supposed to set the example. So if you're asking for the feedback and you're listening to it and then
Yeah,
taking actions, that's what you want them to do. So
exactly.
that's great. We got another question here from Carrie. She's asking, we talked about knowing different preferences of our teams and things like that. So she's asking, how do you keep track of all those differences of your team members? Is it all in your head, or do you keep a spreadsheet? How do you work through all that?
It's a bit of both. I tend to try to set up consistently, whether it's one-on-ones, monthly meetings, quarterly reviews with people all around the org at different levels. So even if, let's say, I had 300 plus people on my team, I still want to meet with individual contributors. I still want to meet with first and second line leaders. So I would set up essentially a cadence where I engage with different people in the organization and keep notes about some of it. So when you talk to them next, you understand some things about them. You learn about them, but it's a combination of some of it is up here, but definitely notes are important. And if the people work in the organization long enough, you start to recognize them. The high performers, for example, when you're doing like yearly reviews, you see all the names and you have notes. So there is some documentation there about the people, learning their styles, what you think their strengths are, all those kind of things. But I would encourage people to make sure they're engaging with their folks and they take good notes. And so when you go back to them, if you can't remember it, you can go back to your notes when you go, like if I met Kathy for the first time and I'm going to talk to her in 3 months, it's like go back and look at my notes so I understand, things about Kathy. She loves animals, she loves the outdoors, she really enjoys great food, or whatever those things are. I do think the personal aspects too are important. It can't all be just business if you're trying to build a rapport and relationships with people.
Yeah, I agree. And it's one of the exercises we've done with a lot of our teams when we do boot camp trainings and things like that. It's putting your profile together. So having each individual put together what their personal goals are, right? How do they like to show up? Do they prefer email? How do they like, feedback? And it's more of, yes, it's documentation, which is great, but it's more of the stories behind it because we tend to remember the stories.
Yeah, you do.
Someone shared with me the reason that they were getting frustrated with their team because their team wasn't just jumping in assuming something, right, and taking the initiative. Well, he learned and shared with the team was, I grew up with my family always jumping in, and he goes, I expect my team to do that. And the team was like, well, wait a minute, we're afraid to jump in because we don't want to get it wrong and we're fearful, and just that dialogue opens up a whole new world of better teaming together, and working together and collaborating.
Yeah, that's so true. It is. I think it's something you've got to continually look at is, are you getting what you expect from the team? And then look, what's your role in that, Kathy? And I think you kind of covered that. And you do need to understand your role and be willing. Maybe it's showing a little bit of vulnerability, like, hey, I do this for this reason. And I know you're familiar with these things like disc profile and so on. And sometimes it can be a fun exercise where you have a disc profile or some sort of profile, and then you share it with each other, and you learn about how to engage or why someone may exhibit a certain approach or behavior. But those things, I believe, do help with building higher performing teams in the long run. If you know how to interact and work together better, generally the results will be better over time.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see the bricks over my shoulder, but that's
Oh,
my.
yeah.
We do a lot of Clarity 4D, and so absolutely, where your energies are coming from. So, where do you get most of your energy from? What's your high disc profile? Are you do you remember?
In so many years, but the last time I did it, it was a high D.
Okay, because I
Uh,
think that's similar to the red energy, where you're kind of running to the fire, getting things done. But
yeah,
you can be very reflective. You're very analytical.
yeah. But I'm big. I like to be engaged and solve problems and help. And I think if you set the tone that, hey, we're all here trying to do the right thing, and if you, I guess that adage, if you lead from example, and if there's a problem or if there's something that need to be solved, go do it. Um, and one interesting thing that I did learn is you can't go try to solve everything. Like
Mm.
you got to, even if you have the tendency to go do it, you got to make sure it's the right thing and at the right time. So definitely be purposeful around what you're trying to do, not just try to do everything.
Yeah, that's great advice, because I think we do tend to, all this stuff is coming at us. And really, as a leader, our job is to align those requests and prioritize the right ones, right? And know what we should be working on.
Yeah. I mean, and when you look at a team, you know, you've got to make sure you're focused on the work that matters. And so when you choose to do one thing, chances are you're choosing not to do something else. And so what is that? What is that prioritization? And if you run and try to solve everything right away, you may miss some of the more strategic or important things. So I do, and you mentioned the word balance, like with anything as a leader, there has to be some sort of balance, and you need to reflect and look at some of these things and make sure it's the right thing to do.
Yep, absolutely. Antoine actually had a great description of modern leadership, right? It's really resembling coaching, offering guidance, providing clear feedback on completed work, and fostering adaptability to help both the team and individuals grow.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great comment. And I know Antoine, so he's a fantastic leader, and he's given me some really good coaching and advice. And I always appreciate when you're working with leaders around you, and you there's always an opportunity to learn, and coaching is really important. uh, Always, because things change, you change as well, and getting that consistent feedback from people you work with is key. So I appreciate that, Antoine, and thank you for the gift of feedback.
I love it. I mean, I look at coaching or feedback or having your mentors, your personal board of directors, right, that can help guide you, because sometimes we get in our own jam job, we can't read the label,
Yeah,
right? And would you say, because you had mentioned early in the conversation that coaching was a big thing for you and helping you really learn about yourself and drive change of how you showed up.
yeah. It became more important the longer I was in leadership, and part of it was I had my own aspirations of where I wanted to go, and I think coaching helped me. I'll say unblock some of it. Is maybe I was stuck in a certain area, and you know as a leader you get a brand, and that brand is what other people say about you or what they think about you. And I knew what my brand was. Chris was very technical, very execution focused, very this, very that. And I got some feedback on a couple areas I needed to improve upon, and finally I decided to act on it. And I had the opportunity actually here at ServiceNow to take some leadership training and actually get some personal coaches, which was a little, I'd say nerve-wracking. Maybe I was a little apprehensive, is because they go out, they do a 360 review, they interview people, they collect the feedback, and they share it with you, and you're like, oh wow. But I just leaned in and embraced it, and it definitely helped me, and I believe it helped some of the other people around me. In general, it made me a better leader, and the coaching, some of it was probably not what I expected, but I would encourage anyone, if you're in a leadership position, take advantage of any training, any enablement, invest in yourself, get a coach where possible. And then I also used like our company has you can go out and take a class, and then you can get refunded. So I would do things like at online Cornell classes and so on during COVID, around like leadership, executive presence, storytelling, all these kind of things. So that I augmented that with the coach. And it was, like, for me, very, very important. And I wish, I should have done it sooner. But I didn't. And I'm glad I did when I had the opportunity, Kathy.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Chris, because when we think about it, leadership is a journey. It's not a one and done type training, right?
Yeah.
It because situations change, experiences happen. We run a boot camp for leaders, and we've actually made it public so that if companies aren't providing the leadership internally, then they can come to the E3 Leadership Boot Camp, and then we keep the community going. Because what we like to do is, listen, you probably have issues that you have to deal with at times, and you're like, how would I handle this? I haven't been in this situation before, right?
Yeah.
So having a community where you can talk openly about how have you done this, I think is really important as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think you have your own kind of board of directors or personal people you reach out to, when I talk to folks also about getting mentors, I do think it's important to have a mentor that's kind of separated from your like direct team or role, because they're going to give you different feedback. So when you look at leadership training, your board of director, getting mentors, obviously you want to have that within the team and within your community. But I do believe it's just as important to have kind of someone that has a couple, they're away from the day to day, and they can give you some different type of feedback or objective feedback where they're not personally invested in some of the stuff. So it's you don't have to worry about some things. But yeah, it's investing in leadership is important, and it's overlooked a lot of times.
Well,
Either
you started and said I got promoted because I was the most tenured, right?
yeah, yeah, that's how it started for me. It was like, wow. And it was amazing. I felt amazing. And then all of a sudden you get thrown into a situation where something goes wrong. Either you're trying to sell something happens at a customer, there's an issue with a person, and you're dealing with HR, and all of a sudden it's new to you. You have no experience, and like, no one gave you any training. So you're kind of learning on the job, and learning on the job as a leader. That's a tough way to do it. What's the saying? Experience is a tough teacher. And people leave companies or leave your team I think in those situations. And so investing in yourself and finding out how you can develop leadership skills, however that is really important.
Yep. Agreed. Well, Chris, I can't thank you enough. I told you this time would go fast. Every time I'm on one of these calls, they're like, we're at the bottom of the hour already. We're well past. But thank you so much for joining. I just want to close with one question for you.
Yeah.
Because some people don't know if leadership is always the right thing. What's one thing that you say you absolutely love about leadership?
The people. It's really the people I think gives me energy, and I like to be engaged with people and working together. So that is really, I think, amazing as a leader. And without the people, there's really nothing. There's not a lot not to lead. So I think the people is amazing, and then watching their journeys. So you hear all kinds of different terms, like as a leader, climb and lift. As you're climbing, are you lifting the people up with you? Are you helping them? All those type of things. But it really comes down to the people. And I've been so fortunate to work with amazing people around me and have amazing people that work for me or that I work for. But yeah, Kathy, it's really the people at the end of the day for me.
Well, I teed up that softball for you, Chris, because that's what I'm passionate about.
I know. Yeah. But, if there's no people, there's no team to lead. So it's kind of you've got to invest and I think be people oriented in leadership to some degree for sure. And yeah, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that says a lot for someone that knows how to deliver results, knows how to drive change like yourself, and knowing that people are key to your success. I mean, yes, you could do it all by yourself and you could dictate and tell people how to do it, but it's a hard slog if you go that way.
I mean, I can say personally, I would never be in the position I am without great people around me. And those are the great leaders I worked with, either for me, above me, adjacent to me. But I'm so thankful that I've had great people around me, and I know I would not have the privilege to be in the role that I am without the amazing support and work that everyone else. It's a team sport, as you know, and the people make the biggest difference at the end of the day.
I love it. And in the comments, Chris, they're coming through, thanks for being a great coach. They just had nothing but praise for all that you do. So thank you for being such a great leader and helping others learn and sharing all your knowledge with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kathy. Really appreciate the time. And thanks for everyone online with the questions. Really, really appreciate it. And looking at all the chat messages right now.
Great. Thanks so much. Have a great day, all.